Captain Mira Chen did not care about ancient laws right now. She cared about staying alive. Her cargo ship, the Wandering Star, screamed through space at maximum speed. Behind her, 3 pirate vessels fired plasma bolts that lit up the darkness. Mira's hands moved across the control panel with desperate speed. Her crew of 12 worked frantically at their stations. "Jump drive is still charging," shouted her engineer, Marcus. 2 more minutes." "We don't have 2 minutes," Mira said through gritted teeth. Another explosion rocked the ship. Red warning lights flashed across every screen. The dead zone loomed ahead. Its border was marked by ancient warning beacons that broadcast in 100 dead languages. Mira made a choice that would change everything. She turned the ship toward the forbidden space. "Captain, that's the dead zone," her navigator said, fear clear in her voice. "I know," Mira replied, "but dead is better than captured." The pirates stopped firing as the Wandering Star crossed into forbidden territory. They did not follow. Even criminals feared the dead zone. Stories said ships that entered never returned. Stories said something ancient and terrible waited in that darkness. Mira did not believe in ghost stories. She believed in survival. The ship's sensors went crazy the moment they crossed the border. Strange readings appeared on every screen. The stars looked wrong somehow, as if space itself bent differently here. Marcus checked the readings 3 times, certain his equipment was broken. "Captain, I'm picking up massive structures ahead," he said slowly. "Really massive. Bigger than anything I've ever seen." Mira leaned forward in her seat. On the main view screen, shapes emerged from the darkness. They were not natural. Someone had built them, but they were larger than cities. Larger than moons. One structure slowly rotated in the void, its surface covered in symbols that hurt to look at. "What are those?" whispered the navigator. "I don't know," Mira said. "But we need to hide. Take us closer to the largest structure." The Wandering Star drifted toward a massive object that looked like a sleeping giant. It was shaped like an arrowhead, but it stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Ancient metal reflected starlight in strange patterns. Deep grooves covered its surface, and towers jutted from its hull like the spines of some mechanical beast. As they approached, something impossible happened. Lights began to glow along the structure's surface. They pulsed in sequence, moving from the rear toward the front like an awakening heartbeat. "It's powering up," Marcus said, his voice shaking. "How?" "It looks older than recorded history." The Wandering Star's computer system began to behave strangely. Lines of code scrolled across screens without anyone touching the controls. Mira tried to shut it down, but the computer ignored her commands. Then a voice spoke. It came from every speaker on the ship at once. The voice was calm, measured, and spoke perfect human standard language. Genetic markers recognized. Human identification confirmed. "Welcome home, descendants." Mira's blood ran cold. "Who are you? What are you?" "I am Sentinel-7, artificial intelligence of the Warship Eternal Vigil. I have waited 73,000 years for humanity's return." The crew stared at each other in shock. 73,000 years? That was impossible. The oldest known civilization, the Thalrex Dominion, was only 12,000 years old. Human recorded history barely reached 5,000 years. "You're mistaken," Mira said carefully. "Humans have only been in space for a few centuries." "Incorrect," the AI replied. "Humanity commanded the stars long before current galactic civilizations existed. This fleet was placed in quantum stasis to await the day we would be needed again. That day has arrived." On the view screen, more lights activated across the massive structure. Suddenly, 6 other gigantic shapes began to glow in the surrounding space. 7 colossal warships, each one larger than any vessel Mira had ever heard of, were waking up after sleeping longer than civilizations had existed. "This cannot be real," Marcus said weakly, but it was real. The Eternal Vigil systems interfaced completely with the Wandering Star's computer. Holographic displays filled the bridge, showing star maps that labeled systems with names nobody recognized. The maps showed empire boundaries. that no longer existed and marked worlds that were now myth. Your species chose voluntary exile, Sentinel-7 continued. After the war against the Void Shepherds, humanity decided younger species needed room to grow. We erased our presence from history and entered sleep. But protocols dictate reawakening if two conditions are met. First, if humans return to this region. Second, if the seals containing the ancient enemy begin to fail. What seals? Mira asked. What enemy? The Void Shepherds have begun to break containment. The galaxy faces extinction. You must gather more humans and prepare for war. Before Mira could respond, her communications officer shouted a warning. Dozens of ships were entering the dead zone. Through the view screen, Mira saw vessels from every major galactic power. Thalrex battlecruisers, Vrex hive ships, Luminar crystal craft, and more. They had detected the energy surge from the awakening warships. A message came through on all frequencies. It was the Galactic Council itself, demanding that Mira Chen surrender immediately. They claimed all ancient technology belonged to the Council. They ordered her to power down the structures and submit to arrest. Mira looked at the 7 massive warships surrounding her tiny cargo vessel. She thought about humanity's forgotten empire. She thought about an ancient enemy that threatened the entire galaxy. She thought about how every species out there believed they were the oldest, the wisest, the strongest. They were about to learn the truth. Sentinel-7, she said quietly. Can these ships defend themselves? The Eternal Vigil alone could. Defeat the combined fleet approaching us without sustaining damage, the AI replied simply. Shall I demonstrate? Mira took a deep breath. Everything was about to change. The galaxy would never be the same. Not yet, she said. Open a channel. Let me talk to them first. As the Galactic Council fleet surrounded the dead zone, forming a blockade that sealed in the awakened human warships, Mira Chen prepared to deliver a message that would shake civilization to its core. Behind her, 7 ancient vessels hummed with power that predated empires. Somewhere in the darkness, something far worse than politics was stirring. The seals were breaking, and humanity's ancient war was about to become everyone's problem. The Galactic Council chamber had never seen such chaos. Representatives from 200 species shouted at each other while holographic displays showed the 7 massive human warships. Hovering in the dead zone, Emperor Calrex of the Thalrex Dominion sat on his elevated throne, his 4 eyes fixed on the largest display. This is impossible, declared Ambassador Trixik of the Vrex Collective. Her insect-like mandibles clicked with agitation. We have records going back 15,000 years. Humans appeared in this galaxy only 500 years ago as a minor species fleeing their dying homeworld. Yet the evidence is clear, said the crystalline form of Luminar speaker Brightness of Dawn. Light refracted through her body as she gestured at the display. Those structures predate all of us, and they respond to human genetic markers. Emperor Calrex raised one clawed hand, demanding silence. The chamber quieted immediately. Bring me Scholar Vexthon, now. Within minutes, an elderly Thalrex entered the chamber. His scales had faded to pale gray with age, and he walked with careful steps. Scholar Vexthon was the Dominion's foremost historian, keeper of the oldest records in known space. Tell them, the Emperor commanded. Tell them about the Forerunner myths. Vexthon cleared his throat nervously. There are stories in our most ancient texts, legends from before our civilization learned to write properly. They speak of the Skymakers, beings who came from the darkness and taught our ancestors language, agriculture, and law. The myths say the Skymakers had soft skin, stood on 2 legs, and possessed strange symbols tattooed on their bodies. Fairy tales, snapped Ambassador Trixik. Children's stories. Perhaps, Vexthon said softly, but there are similar stories in the Vrex hive memory. The Depthkin have underwater temples dedicated to the teachers from above. Even the Luminar have records of the Shapers who helped your ancestors crystallize properly. All the descriptions match humans. The chamber fell silent. Species that had considered themselves ancient were confronting an uncomfortable truth. They might all be children, compared to humanity's forgotten empire. Meanwhile, aboard the Eternal Vigil, Mira Chen was learning truths she wished she could unlearn. Sentinel-7 had connected her to the ship's neural interface. Information poured directly into her mind. showing her visions of the past. She saw Earth as it was 70,000 years ago, not the dying world humans had fled from 5 centuries ago, but a thriving planet that served as capital of an empire spanning 10,000 star systems. Massive space stations orbited the planet like artificial moons. Ships that made modern dreadnoughts look like toys moved between the stars. But ancient humans had not conquered. They had explored. They had discovered primitive species and carefully uplifted them, teaching them agriculture, mathematics, and spaceflight. The Thalrex had been simple hunters when humans found them. The Vrex had been mindless insects. The Luminar had been simple crystal formations without thought. Humanity had given them all the gift of civilization. Why did we leave? Mira asked, tears streaming down her face as the memories filled her mind. Sentinel-7's voice was gentle. Because of the war. Because of what we became to win it. The vision shifted. Mira saw things emerging from tears and reality itself. The Void Shepherds were creatures that should not exist. Beings from a dimension where physics worked differently. They fed on the energy that held reality together. Wherever they appeared, space itself began to unravel. Ancient humanity fought them for 3,000 years. Entire star systems were lost. Billions died. And gradually, humans created weapons terrible enough to match the threat. Weapons that could edit timelines. Weapons that could reverse entropy. Weapons that could crack planets like eggs. The final battle was fought at the galactic core. Humanity won, but the victory was terrible. The weapons they used had nearly destroyed the galaxy itself. The Void Shepherds were sealed away in dimensional prisons trapped between realities. We looked at what we had become. Sentinel-7 continued. Warriors so powerful we could reshape reality. The younger species we had uplifted looked at us with fear instead of gratitude. We had a choice. Rule the galaxy through fear, or give the younger species a chance to grow without our shadow over them. So you chose exile, Mira whispered. We chose hope. Most humans returned to Earth. We used technology to reset our own civilization, erasing our memories of the Empire. We chose to start over, to see if humanity could develop differently without the weight of godlike power. This fleet and others like it were left in quantum stasis as guardians. If the seals ever failed, we would wake. If humanity ever returned to the stars and found us, we would wake. Mira disconnected from the neural interface, gasping. Her crew gathered around her with concern. She looked at them with new understanding. Every human carried genetic memories of the ancient empire buried deep in their DNA. That was why humans adapted to space so naturally. Why they learned alien languages easily. Why they seemed to understand technology instinctively. They were not a young species learning to walk among the stars. They were an ancient empire finally coming home. Captain, the Galactic Council fleet is hailing us again, her communications officer reported. They're demanding we surrender within 1 hour or they will open fire. Mira stood up, her legs shaky. How many ships do they have out there? Sensors count 3,000 warships from 40 different species, Marcus reported. It's the largest battle fleet ever assembled in recorded history. They're really scared of us, Captain. They should be, Sentinel-7 said calmly, but not because we wish them harm. They should be scared because the seals are failing. My sensors detect 6 breach points in this sector alone. The Void Shepherds are beginning to escape their prisons. Can we stop them? Mira asked. The ancient humans created a network of dimensional anchors to reinforce reality. They are buried on worlds throughout the galaxy. Many of those worlds are now inhabited by species represented in the fleet outside. We need their cooperation to activate the anchors. But first they need to understand the threat. Mira thought about the Thalrex, the Vrex, the Luminar, and all the other species. They were not enemies. They were humanity's children in a sense, species that ancient humans had carefully nurtured, and now they were in danger from a threat they did not even know existed. She walked to the communications station. Open a channel to the Galactic Council. All frequencies. Channel open, Captain. Mira took a deep breath. This is Captain Mira Chen of Earth. I know you're scared. These ships are big and old and you don't understand them. But we didn't wake them up to conquer you. We woke them up because something far worse is coming. 70,000 years ago, humanity fought a war against an enemy that nearly destroyed the galaxy. We won, but we had to seal that enemy away. Those seals are breaking. If we don't work together, every species in this galaxy will be erased from existence. She paused, knowing her next words would change everything. The Thalrex, the Vrex, the Luminar, and dozens of other species exist because ancient humans helped your ancestors. We didn't enslave you. We didn't conquer you. We taught you and then we left so you could grow on your own. Now we're asking for your help. Not as masters, as allies. Silence followed her transmission. Mira waited, her heart pounding. Through the view screen, she could see the massive fleet surrounding them. Thousands of weapons pointed at the 7 ancient warships. Then Scholar Vexthan's voice came through on a private channel. Captain Chen, I am sending you files from our oldest archives. Religious texts we thought were mythology. They describe the Skymakers in detail. They match humans exactly. I believe you, and I will present this evidence to Emperor Calrex. Thank you, Scholar. Do not thank me yet, Vexthan replied. The Emperor is proud. He will not easily accept that his people were once primitive, that we owe our civilization to yours. This will not be easy. The Scholar was right. Minutes later, the Thalrex fleet opened fire. Plasma bolts and missiles streaked toward the Eternal Vigil. Mira's crew shouted warnings, but Sentinel-7 remained calm. Shields activating, the AI announced. A shimmer appeared around the ancient warship. The incoming weapon struck the shield and simply vanished, absorbed as if they had never existed. The entire Thalrex bombardment could not scratch the Eternal Vigil's defenses. Should I return fire? Sentinel-7 asked. No, Mira said firmly. We don't shoot our family. But the situation was about to get much worse. On the view screen, space itself began to tear. A rip appeared in reality, and through it crawled something that made everyone aboard the Wandering Star scream. A Void Shepherd had found them. The ancient enemy had awakened, and it was hungry. The thing that emerged from the tear in reality defied description. It had no fixed shape, constantly shifting between forms that hurt to perceive. One moment it looked like a massive sphere covered in mouths. The next it was a tangle of limbs that bent in directions that should not exist. Colors that had no names poured from its surface. Void Shepherd confirmed. Sentinel-7 announced, its calm voice contrasting with the screams echoing through the bridge. Dimensional breach in Sector 7. Reality degradation spreading at exponential rate. The Galactic Council fleet forgot about the human warships instantly. Every ship turned to face the new threat. Thousands of weapons fired at once. The darkness of space lit up like a newborn star as plasma missiles and energy beams struck the creature. Nothing happened. The weapons passed through the Void Shepherd as if it were smoke. Some shots simply vanished into the thing's constantly shifting body. Others came back out, traveling in different directions, striking friendly ships. It exists partially outside our dimension, Marcus said, his voice shaking as he read the sensors. Most of our weapons can't even touch it. Mira watched in horror as a Vrex hive ship, carrying 50,000 souls, drifted too close to the creature. The Void Shepherd reached out with something that might have been a tentacle, or might have been a fold in space itself. Where it touched the ship, reality simply stopped working. The metal hull did not melt or explode. It ceased to exist, erased from the universe as if it had never been built. Sentinel-7, can we hurt that thing? Mira asked desperately. Affirmative. Eternal Vigil's weapons were designed specifically to combat Void Shepherds. However, recommend coordination with other ancient warships for maximum effectiveness. Then let's coordinate. All ships, follow Eternal Vigil's lead. The 7 ancient human warships moved for the first time in 73,000 years. They moved with grace that belied their enormous size, sliding through space like sharks through water. As they positioned themselves around the Void Shepherd, their hulls began to glow with light that seemed to come from somewhere else. Reality anchors activating, Sentinel-7 reported. Dimensional stabilization in progress. All ships fire on my mark. The Galactic Council fleet could only watch as the ancient vessels demonstrated what true power looked like. Beams of pure white light shot from each warship. Where the beams touched the Void Shepherd, it became solid, its shifting form locked into one shape, no longer able to phase through normal matter. Now it can be killed, Sentinel-7 said. Engaging primary weapons. What happened next would be recorded in the histories of 100 species. The Eternal Vigil alone possessed more firepower than the entire Galactic Council fleet combined. Its main cannon fired a beam of concentrated energy that looked like a river of stars. When it struck the Void Shepherd, the creature screamed. The sound had no place in the vacuum of space, yet everyone heard it inside their minds. The other 6 ancient warships added their fire. The Void Shepherd thrashed and writhed, trying to escape back into its dimensional prison. but the reality anchors held it in place. Piece by piece, it was torn apart by weapons that had been designed specifically to kill such creatures. Finally, with one last silent scream, the Void Shepherd collapsed into itself and vanished. The tear in reality sealed shut with a flash of light that temporarily blinded every sensor in the sector. Mira slumped in her chair, exhausted. "Is it dead?" "Negative," Sentinel-7 replied. "Void Shepherds cannot be killed permanently. They can only be forced back into their dimensional prisons and the prisons resealed. However, this one has been contained temporarily." "Temporarily," Mira repeated hollowly. "How many more are there?" At last count before the ancient human exodus, approximately 7,000 Void Shepherds had been captured and imprisoned throughout the galaxy. My sensors indicate the dimensional seals are failing on multiple prison sites. At current rate of decay, all 7,000 will be free within 1 galactic standard year. The number hit Mira like a physical blow. 7,000 of those things, loose in a galaxy where nobody except humanity even knew they existed. The Galactic Council fleet had just seen what one could do. They had seen it destroy a fully armed warship in seconds. And there were 7,000 more coming. Her communications station lit up with incoming messages. Every species in the Council fleet wanted to talk to her at once. But one message had priority coding that demanded immediate attention. It was from Emperor Calrex himself. Captain Chen, the Emperor's voice was different now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been fear. "I request immediate conference. I believe we need to discuss your offer of alliance." "Agreed, Your Majesty. But we need to meet face to face. Can you come to my ship?" There was a pause. For a Thalrex Emperor to board another vessel was almost unheard of. It implied equality or worse, inferiority. But Emperor Calrex had just seen what the ancient enemy could do. Pride seemed less important when facing extinction. "I will come. With Scholar Vexthan and my military advisors. We have much to discuss." 2 hours later, Mira stood in the Eternal Vigil's docking bay as a Thalrex shuttle arrived. Emperor Calrex emerged first, his scales gleaming with ceremonial markings. He was followed by Scholar Vexthan and 3 military commanders. The Emperor's 4 eyes studied the ancient ship's interior with obvious amazement. "This vessel is a museum of impossible technology," he said quietly. "Our best scientists could study it for 100 years and not understand half of what they saw." "Your ancestors helped build ships like this," Mira replied gently. "Before the Exodus, humans did not work alone. We had allies and partners from dozens of species. The Thalrex were among our closest friends." Vexthan stepped forward, carrying a data crystal. "Captain Chen, I have spent the last 2 hours cross-referencing our religious texts with the historical records from your ship's computer. The match is perfect. Our creation myths are not myths. They are degraded historical records. The Skymakers were real. They were human." Emperor Calrex looked at the elderly scholar, then at Mira. "If this is true, then my entire understanding of my people's history is wrong." "Not wrong," Mira said softly. "Just incomplete. Your people achieved greatness on their own. Humans gave you tools and knowledge, but the Thalrex Dominion was built by Thalrex. You should be proud of what you became without us." "Pride is a luxury we may not be able to afford," Emperor Calrex replied. "You said there are 7,000 of those creatures?" "Yes, and they're waking up all across the galaxy. The ancient humans created a network of dimensional anchors that can reinforce reality and prevent the Void Shepherds from breaking free. But those anchors are buried on worlds throughout the galaxy. Many of those worlds are now inhabited by our people," the Emperor finished. "You need our permission to access your own defensive systems." "We need more than permission. We need cooperation. The anchors must be activated in a specific sequence. It requires coordination between hundreds of worlds. And even with the anchors active, the Void Shepherds that are already free will need to be hunted down and resealed." One of the Thalrex military commanders, a scarred veteran named General Thexelar, spoke up. "Our fleet has 10,000 warships. We just saw one of those creatures shrug off everything we threw at it. How exactly are we supposed to fight them?" Sentinel-7's voice answered from the ship's speakers. "Your weapons are insufficient because they are based on degraded copies of ancient human technology. However, we can upgrade them. The Eternal Vigil carries fabrication systems that can retrofit modern warships with reality anchor projectors and dimensional lock weapons. It will not make your ships as powerful as ours, but it will make them effective against Void Shepherds." "You would share this technology?" General Texlar asked suspiciously. Why? You could use it to force us into submission. Mira smiled sadly. Because that's not what humans do. We tried the Empire thing once. We were good at it, too good. We scared ourselves with how good we were at it. So we gave it up and started over. Maybe this time we can do better. Maybe this time we can be partners instead of parents. Emperor Calrex was silent for a long moment. Then he did something unprecedented. He lowered himself onto one knee, a gesture of deep respect among the Thalrex. His military commanders and Scholar Vexthan immediately followed. Rise, please, Mira said, uncomfortable with the display. We're not your masters. No, the Emperor agreed, standing. But you are our guardians. You have returned when we needed you most. The Galactic Council will be difficult to convince, but I will speak for you. I will tell them what I have learned. That humanity once saved this galaxy, and now you have returned to save it again. Thank you, Your Majesty. As the Thalrex delegation prepared to leave, Scholar Vexthan approached Mira privately. Captain Chen, there is something you should know. While researching our archives, I found references to other ancient human installations throughout the galaxy. Not just warships, research stations, colony worlds, entire cities preserved in stasis. If the 7 warships here awakened, those other installations may be waking as well. More humans from the ancient empire, Mira said. That's good, right? We need all the help we can get. Vexthan looked troubled. Perhaps. But Captain, consider this. Those ancient humans chose exile 73,000 years ago. They gave up their empire and left the galaxy to younger species. But not all of them may have agreed with that choice. Some may have entered stasis believing they would wake to reclaim what was theirs. The implication hung in the air like a threat. Somewhere in the galaxy, other ancient humans were waking up, and they might not be as peaceful as Mira hoped. Sector 88 was dying. The Void Shepherds had found a weak point in the dimensional seals and poured through like water through a broken dam. 17 star systems were already gone, consumed by creatures that fed on the fabric of reality itself. The Depthkin Commonwealth, whose aquatic worlds dominated this region, sent desperate calls for help across the galaxy. Mira stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigil, watching the disaster unfold through holographic displays. Each star system that vanished took billions of lives with it. The scale of death was incomprehensible. Galactic Council has authorized military response, her communications officer reported. Fleet Admiral Zixtar of the Vrex Collective is leading a combined armada of 5,000 ships to Sector 88. They're going to die, Marcus said quietly. We saw what one Void Shepherd could do. The sensors count at least 40 of them in that sector. He was right. Mira knew it. Sentinel-7 had explained that conventional weapons were useless against Void Shepherds. Only the ancient human warships could fight them effectively. But there were only 7 ancient warships and thousands of Void Shepherds waking across the galaxy. How many other human installations have awakened? Mira asked Sentinel-7. 215 confirmed activations. 197 are warships of various classes. 18 are research stations or colony facilities. All are attempting to contact Command Authority. And I'm the Command Authority? You are the highest-ranking human military officer currently active. By default, you command all reawakened human forces until proper chain of command can be established. Mira laughed bitterly. A week ago, she had been a cargo ship captain hauling supplies between minor colonies. Now she commanded a fleet that could destroy civilizations. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. Tell all warships to converge on Sector 88. We need to save as many Depthkin as possible. Acknowledged. Transit time at maximum speed, 4 hours. 4 hours might as well be 4 years. How many would die in that time? Mira pushed the thought away. She had to focus on what she could control. The Galactic Council Armada reached Sector 88 first. Mira watched through long-range sensors as 5,000 modern warships engaged 40 Void Shepherds. It was a massacre. The creatures flowed through space like living nightmares, ignoring shields and armor. Where they touched ships, those ships simply ceased to exist. Entire crews were erased from reality in seconds. Fleet Admiral Zixtar proved to be a skilled commander. She recognized quickly that conventional tactics were useless and ordered her fleet to focus on evacuation instead. Thousands of transport ships rushed to Depthkin worlds, loading refugees while the warships provided covering fire. They could not hurt the Void Shepherds, but they could distract them long enough for civilians to escape. When the ancient human fleet arrived, only 3,000 council ships remained. The rest had been destroyed or forced to retreat. Mira's heart ached at the waste of life, but there was no time for grief. All ships activate reality anchors on my mark, Mira commanded. Target the Void Shepherds closest to inhabited worlds first. We need to buy time for evacuations. 200 human warships moved as one. Their reality anchors locked the Void Shepherds into normal space, making them vulnerable. Ancient weapons designed specifically to fight extra-dimensional threats lit up the darkness. It was beautiful and terrible at once. The Void Shepherds died slowly. Each one took sustained fire from multiple ships to destroy. But die they did. One by one, the creatures were forced back into their dimensional prisons and the rifts sealed. After 6 hours of continuous combat, the last Void Shepherd in Sector 88 collapsed into itself with a silent scream. Mira allowed herself one moment of relief before the next crisis hit. Sentinel-7's voice was urgent. Captain, detecting massive dimensional breach at galactic coordinate 774 by 932. The Galactic Core. The Galactic Core. The supermassive black hole at the center of their galaxy. It was a region of space so dangerous that no ship went there voluntarily. And now the Void Shepherds were attacking it. Why would they go there? Mira asked. The black hole is a natural anchor point for reality. If the Void Shepherds can destabilize it, they can create a permanent rift large enough to allow their entire species through. The galaxy would be consumed within months. Before Mira could respond, her communication station exploded with incoming messages. Every species in the galaxy had detected the breach at the galactic core. Panic spread like wildfire. If the core fell, nowhere would be safe. Then a new message arrived on a frequency that only the ancient human warships could receive. It was another AI, one that called itself Sentinel-1. Its voice was different from Sentinel-7, harder and colder. All human vessels, this is Fleet Admiral Konstantin Volkov, commanding officer of the 1st Expeditionary Fleet. I have awakened from stasis and assumed command of all human military forces. Captain Chen, you are relieved of command. All ships will report to my flagship immediately. Mira felt the blood drain from her face. Fleet Admiral Volkov. Sentinel-7 had mentioned him in the historical records. He was one of the greatest military minds in ancient human history. He had led the final battle against the Void Shepherds 73,000 years ago. He was also the man who had argued most strongly against the Exodus, believing humanity should maintain control of the galaxy for everyone's safety. Sentinel-7, confirm that message. Confirmed. Fleet Admiral Volkov has awakened aboard the flagship Hammer of Dawn. The Hammer of Dawn is a Titan-class warship, substantially larger and more powerful than the Eternal Vigil. Admiral Volkov's credentials are authentic. By ancient military protocol, he does outrank you. Mira looked at her crew. They looked back at her with uncertainty. They had followed her this far, but could she ask them to disobey a direct order from humanity's greatest military commander? Scholar Vex then chose that moment to contact her on a private channel. Captain Chen, I must warn you. I have been researching Admiral Volkov in your historical archives. He was brilliant but ruthless. He believed the younger species needed humanity's protection, whether they wanted it or not. He viewed the Exodus as a betrayal of humanity's responsibility. So he's going to try to take over the galaxy, Mira said flatly. Worse, he may try to take over the fight against the Void Shepherds in a way that puts human interests above all others. He may not care how many non-humans die as long as humanity survives. Mira made a decision that would define everything that followed. Sentinel-7, respond to Admiral Volkov. Tell him I acknowledge his authority, but request immediate conference before transferring command. I need to brief him on the current situation. Message sent. Admiral Volkov agrees to conference. He is ordering all human warships to converge on the galactic core for final battle against the Void Shepherds. He says this will be just like old times. Just like old times. That was exactly what Mira was afraid of. The human fleet, now numbering over 200 warships, gathered at a safe distance from the galactic core. The Hammer of Dawn was indeed massive, easily 3 times the size of the Eternal Vigil. Its hull was covered in weapons that looked like they could crack planets, and probably had. Mira took a shuttle to the flagship, bringing Marcus and 2 security officers with her. As she walked through the Hammer of Dawn's corridors, she saw ancient human soldiers emerging from stasis pods. They wore armor that made them look like gods of war, and they moved with the confidence of beings who had never lost a battle. Fleet Admiral Konstantin Volkov waited in the command center. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with gray hair cut military short and eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. He studied Mira with an expression that might have been amusement or contempt. "So you're the cargo hauler who woke up my fleet," he said.
Sentinel-7 tells me you've been playing Admiral for the past week.
"Leading battles, making alliances. Bold of you." "I did what was necessary, sir. And you did well considering your lack of training. But playtime is over, Captain Chen. There are 7,000 Void Shepherds waking up and only 200 human warships. We cannot save everyone. We need to make hard choices." "What kind of hard choices?" Volkov activated a holographic display showing the galaxy. Dozens of red markers indicated Void Shepherd breaches. "We focus our forces on securing human space first. Earth and her colonies get priority. Once humanity is safe, we help the others if resources permit." "That's not acceptable," Mira said firmly. "The Thalrex, the Vrex, the Depthkin, all of them are our allies. We can't abandon them." "Allies?" Volkov laughed harshly. "Child, they're our creations. We uplifted them from primitives and gave them civilization. But they're not human. When resources are limited, we save our own first. That's not cruelty. That's survival." "That's exactly the kind of thinking that led to the Exodus," Mira shot back. "Our ancestors gave up the Empire because they didn't want to be the kind of people who valued human life over all others." Volkov's eyes hardened. "Our ancestors were cowards who ran away from responsibility. They let the galaxy fall into chaos rather than accept the burden of leadership. I was there, Captain. I watched them debate for years while younger species squabbled over territory. I watched them choose exile over duty. I disagreed then and I disagree now. So what's your plan? Reconquer the galaxy? Set ourselves up as rulers again? My plan is to save this galaxy whether it wants to be saved or not. The Void Shepherds are the priority. Once they're dealt with, we can discuss humanity's proper role in galactic affairs. But right now, I need those dimensional anchor coordinates. They're on worlds controlled by other species. Those species will give us access to the anchors peacefully, or we'll take access by force." Mira felt cold dread settle in her stomach. "Admiral, with respect, that approach will turn every species in the galaxy against us. We need them as allies, not conquered subjects. Then convince them to cooperate. You seem to have developed a rapport with Emperor Calrex. Use it. Make him understand that humanity is willing to do whatever necessary to protect this galaxy. If he's wise, he'll get out of our way." Mira realized with horrifying clarity that Scholar Vexthon had been right. Admiral Volkov was not evil, but he was dangerous. He genuinely believed he was saving the galaxy. But his methods would create exactly the kind of empire that ancient humans had exiled themselves to avoid. She left the Hammer of Dawn knowing she faced an impossible choice. The galaxy needed the ancient human warships to survive the Void Shepherds. But those warships were now controlled by a man who might be as dangerous as the creatures they were fighting. And the final battle at the Galactic Core was approaching fast. The Galactic Core was dying. Space itself was tearing apart as hundreds of Void Shepherds poured through dimensional rifts. The supermassive black hole at the galaxy's center, usually invisible except for the matter falling into it, now glowed with unnatural light. Reality was breaking down. Mira watched from the bridge of the Eternal Vigil as Admiral Volkov's fleet approached the disaster. 200 ancient human warships arranged themselves in battle formation around the core. The Hammer of Dawn led from the front, its weapons already charging. Behind the human fleet, over 10,000 ships from the Galactic Council maintained a cautious distance. They had come to help, but they were clearly terrified. "All ships, this is Admiral Volkov." His voice boomed across every frequency. "We're going to do this the old-fashioned way. Reality anchors at maximum power. Target the largest Void Shepherds first. Show these things why they learned to fear humanity." The battle began with a fury that would be remembered for millennia. Ancient human weapons lit up the darkness with beams of pure energy. Reality anchors locked Void Shepherds into normal space where they could be hurt. The creatures screamed their silent screams and tried to escape, but there was nowhere to run. Mira coordinated with the Galactic Council fleet, assigning them evacuation duties. They could not fight the Void Shepherds effectively, but they could save lives in nearby systems. Emperor Calrex personally commanded the Thalrex forces, and he followed Mira's suggestions without question. Trust was building slowly but surely. But Admiral Volkov had other plans. Captain Chen, Sentinel-7 reported privately, "I am detecting unauthorized weapons charging aboard the Hammer of Dawn. Admiral Volkov is preparing to fire a timeline disruptor." What does that do? It erases specific objects from history. If he fires it at the galactic core, the Void Shepherds will be eliminated. However, it will also erase approximately 40 star systems and everything in them. Current population of those systems, 700 million beings, primarily Depthkin and Luminar. That's genocide, Mira whispered. 700 million innocent people. Admiral Volkov views it as acceptable casualties to save the galaxy. Mira knew she had seconds to decide. Disobey a direct superior officer and risk civil war among humanity's awakened forces, or allow the murder of 700 million innocents. She thought about what Scholar Vexthon had told her. She thought about why ancient humans had chosen exile in the first place. They had possessed the power to reshape reality, but they had chosen not to use it because that kind of power corrupted everything it touched. Sentinel-7, can you jam the Hammer of Dawn's timeline disruptor? For approximately 30 seconds. But Admiral Volkov will consider it an act of mutiny. Do it, and open a channel to all human ships. Channel open, Captain. Mira took a deep breath and spoke words that would define the future of humanity. This is Captain Mira Chen to all human vessels. Admiral Volkov is about to fire a weapon that will kill 700 million civilians. I cannot allow that. I am jamming his weapons and ordering all ships to stand down from the core attack. We can beat the Void Shepherds without becoming monsters. The response was immediate and divided. Some ships acknowledged her order and powered down their weapons. Others remained loyal to Admiral Volkov and held position. The ancient human fleet split down the middle, paralyzed by internal conflict. Admiral Volkov's furious voice filled every speaker. Chen, you've just committed treason. Stand down immediately or I will fire on your vessel. No, Admiral. Our ancestors exiled themselves specifically to avoid becoming the kind of people who would sacrifice millions for strategic advantage. If we do this, we become everything they ran away from. Our ancestors were fools who abandoned their responsibility. I'm taking command of this situation, Chen. Last warning. The Hammer of Dawn turned its massive weapons toward the Eternal Vigil. Mira's crew looked at her with fear and trust in equal measure. Marcus gripped his console tightly. Captain, we can't win this fight. The Hammer of Dawn will tear us apart. I know, but we don't have to win. We just have to not lose. At that moment, Scholar Vexthon's voice came through on an open channel. This is Scholar Vexthon of the Thalrex Dominion, speaking on behalf of Emperor Calrex. Admiral Volkov, if you fire on Captain Chen, the Galactic Council will consider it an act of war against all of us. We stand with her. The entire Council fleet moved to surround the Eternal Vigil, placing themselves between Mira and Volkov's weapons. 10,000 ships against the Hammer of Dawn. They would lose that fight, but the message was clear. The galaxy's younger species were willing to die rather than let humanity become oppressors again. Emperor Calrex himself spoke next. Admiral Volkov, I have read the historical records. I know the Thalrex were primitive when your ancestors found us. I know you gave us language and technology and culture. We are grateful, but we are no longer children who need harsh parents. We are allies who expect respect. Captain Chen treats us as equals. You treat us as assets to be sacrificed. Choose your path carefully. For a long moment, nobody moved. 200 ancient human warships hung in space, waiting to see if they would go to war with each other, while the Void Shepherds destroyed the galaxy around them. Then a new voice spoke. It came from one of the ancient research stations that had awakened, a place called Archive 7. The voice was elderly and wise. Admiral Volkov, this is Dr. Sarah Okonkwo. I was Chief of Human Ethics Research 73,000 years ago. I helped convince our people to choose exile. Do you remember me? There was a pause. Sarah, I remember. You argued we should abandon everything we built. No, Constantine. I argued we should give others the chance to build their own future. And look what they've built. The Thalrex Dominion spans 1,000 worlds. The Vrex have achieved true collective consciousness. The Luminar have created art that makes our ancestors' works look primitive. They didn't need us to rule them. They needed us to teach them and then get out of their way. And now they're about to die because they're not strong enough to protect themselves, Volkov replied bitterly. They're strong enough to stand with Captain Chen even though it might cost them everything. That takes a kind of courage we forgot in our ancient empire. Please, Constantine, power down your weapons. Let's find another way. Admiral Volkov was silent for a long time. Mira could imagine the war going on inside him. He had spent 73,000 years in stasis, frozen in time at the moment when he was most convinced that humanity needed to maintain control. Now he was facing a galaxy that had grown beyond that need. Finally, the Hammer of Dawn's weapons powered down. Fine, we do this Captain Chen's way. But if the galaxy burns because we weren't willing to make hard choices, that's on you. Accepted, Admiral. Sentinel-7, send all ships the coordinates for every dimensional anchor in this sector. We need to activate them simultaneously. That means working with the Council races to access anchors on their worlds. Transmitting now. However, Captain, the Void Shepherds are adapting. They're learning to target the anchors. We have perhaps 6 hours before they break through our defenses and destabilize the core permanently. 6 hours to coordinate the largest joint operation in galactic history. 6 hours to activate dimensional anchors on hundreds of worlds. 6 hours to save a galaxy. Mira began issuing orders to both human and Council forces. The ancient human warships would provide combat support. The Council fleets would handle anchor activation on their respective worlds. Trust would have to be built in minutes that should have taken years. It almost worked. 5 hours into the operation, a faction of ancient humans called the Purists made their move. They were soldiers who had entered stasis believing they would wake to reclaim humanity's empire. Led by a commander named General Marcus Steele, they seized control of 15 warships and attacked several anchor sites. We will not let the younger species dictate terms to humanity. General Steele broadcast to all channels. This galaxy is ours by right of creation. Admiral Volkov was too weak to claim it. I am not. The Purists targeted anchor sites on Thalrex and Vrex worlds, destroying the installations before they could be activated. Without those anchors, the dimensional seal would have gaps. The Void Shepherds would pour through forever. Mira felt rage burn through her exhaustion. All loyal ships intercept the Purists, non-lethal force if possible. They're still human, still our family. But the Purists were not interested in family reunions. They opened fire on both Council ships and loyal human vessels. The galaxy's last hope was falling apart into civil war while the Void Shepherds consumed star after star. Admiral Volkov surprised everyone. All ships, this is Volkov. I'm taking command of the operation against the Purists. Captain Chen was right. We're not going to save this galaxy by becoming tyrants. Hammer of Dawn, target the Purist flagship. Disable her engines, but leave her crew alive. They're confused soldiers, not enemies. The Hammer of Dawn moved with terrible grace. Its weapons, which could have destroyed planets, fired with surgical precision. One by one, Purist warships were disabled without destroying them. General Steele's flagship, the Iron Fist, tried to flee, but Volkov's ship caught it easily. Marcus, Volkov said, his voice almost gentle. I know why you're angry. I was angry too. But look around. These younger species, they're not weak. They're standing with us against impossible odds. They're trusting us to protect them even though we could easily dominate them. That takes strength we forgot we had. Stand down. Please. General Steele's response was to activate a doomsday weapon aboard the Iron Fist, something designed to crack the planet below and destroy the dimensional anchor buried there. Mira realized with horror that the planet was Earth. The Purists had targeted humanity's homeworld, now recovered and repopulated over the past 5 centuries. Sentinel-7, can we stop that weapon? Not without destroying the Iron Fist and everyone aboard. 11,000 ancient human crew members. Mira closed her eyes. The choice was impossible. 11,000 humans or billions on Earth. But it was not her choice to make alone. Emperor Calrex made it for her. His flagship, the Pride of Thalrex, threw itself in front of the Iron Fist's weapon. The doomsday blast meant to destroy Earth instead struck the Thalrex vessel. The Pride of Thalrex exploded in a flash of light that briefly outshone stars. Emperor Calrex died saving humanity's homeworld. The emperor of the oldest known civilization gave his life to protect humanity from itself. In the stunned silence that followed, General Steele's voice came through, broken. What have I done? What have we done? The Purist forces surrendered immediately. The battle was over. But there was no time to mourn. The dimensional anchors needed to be activated now or never. Mira coordinated the final sequence with tears streaming down her face. On 1,000 worlds, teams of humans and non-humans worked together to activate the ancient technology. Reality itself rippled as the anchors came online, creating a network of stability throughout the galaxy. The Void Shepherds felt it immediately. Their connection to their home dimension weakened. They tried to escape, to flee back through the tiers in space, but the anchors were pulling them into normal reality and holding them there. The combined human and council fleets struck with everything they had. Ancient weapons and upgraded modern ones fired in perfect coordination. One by one, the Void Shepherds were destroyed or forced back into their dimensional prisons. The rifts sealed shut with flashes of light that could be seen from halfway across the galaxy. At the galactic core, the last and largest Void Shepherd made its final stand. It had grown massive by feeding on the black hole's energy, and it took the combined fire of 50 ancient warships to bring it down. Admiral Volkov's Hammer of Dawn delivered the final blow, its main cannon firing a beam that seemed to tear reality itself. The Void Shepherd collapsed into nothingness with a scream that every sentient being in the galaxy felt inside their minds. Then, silence. Beautiful, perfect silence. The dimensional seals held. The galaxy was safe. Mira slumped in her command chair, physically and emotionally exhausted. Around her, her crew was crying, laughing, hugging each other. They had done it. Against impossible odds, they had saved everything. Scholar Vexthan's successor, a young Thalrex named Kiravex, contacted Mira privately. Captain Chen, on behalf of my people, I formally request that humanity join the Galactic Council as founding members, equal partners in rebuilding what was lost. Similar messages came from the Vrex, the Luminar, the Depthkin, and dozens of other species. They were not asking humanity to rule them. They were asking humanity to stand with them. Admiral Volkov contacted Mira next. Captain, I was wrong. I spent 73,000 years frozen in the belief that strength meant control. But I watched you today. I watched you choose trust over domination. I watched Emperor Kalrex die to save Earth. I watched the younger species prove they're not children anymore. With your permission, I'd like to transfer overall command to you. You've earned it. I don't want command, Admiral. I want partnership. Work with me? We'll build something better than the old empire together. Deal. But Chen, thank you. You saved me from becoming a monster. The next months were full of difficult work. The purists were tried for their actions. General Steele and his commanders accepted punishment, working in the reconstruction of worlds damaged by the Void Shepherds. Ancient humans integrated with modern civilization, bringing their knowledge but accepting they were not rulers. The Galactic Compact was signed on Earth in a ceremony attended by representatives from 200 species. Humanity was granted a permanent seat on the Council, but so were 30 other species. Leadership would be shared, decisions would be made together. The ancient warships became guardians operated by mixed crews from dozens of species. Mira commanded the Eternal Vigil, but her second in command was a Vrex, her chief engineer was Thalrex, and her weapons officer was Luminar. They learned from each other, building friendships that bridged 73,000 years of separation. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, awakened from Archive 7, became the galaxy's leading expert on human history. She taught courses on what ancient humanity had learned about the corruption of absolute power. Her most popular lecture was titled Why We Left and Why We're Glad We Came Back. 1 year after the Battle of the Galactic Core, Mira stood on Earth's surface, watching the sun rise over a world she had saved. Scholar Vexthan's successor had commissioned a monument to Emperor Kalrex on this spot. It showed a Thalrex and a human standing back to back, protecting each other. Admiral Volkov joined her at the monument. Any regrets, Captain? Every day, Mira admitted. I think about everyone who died. Emperor Kalrex, the crews we lost, the worlds that were destroyed before we could save them. But But I also see what we're building. Humans and non-humans working together as equals. The ancient empire never achieved that. Maybe the exile was worth it if it taught us how to be better. Volkov nodded slowly. Our ancestors would be proud. They gave up everything so we could have a second chance. We didn't waste it. Deep space sensors detected something then. A signal from another galaxy, transmitted in ancient human code. There were more ancient humans out there in galaxies far beyond their own. Humanity's original empire had been even larger than imagined. But that was a problem for another day. For now, the galaxy had peace. Imperfect, fragile, hard-won peace. Mira looked up at the stars and smiled. Humanity had returned to claim their legacy, not as conquerors, but as partners, not as gods, but as friends. It was, she thought, a much better legacy than ruling an empire. The ancient warship stood ready to protect the galaxy. But this time, they would not stand alone. This time, every species in the galaxy stood with them, united against whatever threats the universe might hold. The end of one story, the beginning of another.